me just give you a little bit of a background for my person so that you would know where to put me. In difference to you, Ms. Vice President McGuinness, I was always a feminist. You know, apparently I was born as such. I'm a liberal, and liberals are not always that comfortable with quotas and other positive discriminatory issues. However, I always was, and I was always aware of the fact that gender equality is nothing that is just given to you. But in difference to you, Madam McGuinness, I thought, you know, when I was young and when I was a student and when I wrote my PhD about women's rights as human rights, that by the time when I will be in my career, everything will be outdated and my PhD will be somehow some sort of historical document. However, this is not entirely the case, I have to say. Just what you just mentioned, Mr. Vice President Papadimopoulos, regarding the gender pay gap, just to give the audience a little bit of a feeling of how much actually we have to fight to get there where we want to be. Last week in the plenary here in Brussels, we were actually discussing the gender pay gap. And as a matter of fact, we have one colleague, one MEP from quite an outspoken person from Poland, Mr. Korwin-Mikke, who raised his blue card towards one of our colleagues and actually regarding gender pay gap stated clearly, actually, in his opinion, that I'm speaking now on behalf of him, in my opinion, it is quite clear and quite fair that women earn less than men, since women are weaker, women are smaller, and women are less intelligent. So it is quite obvious that we should earn less than men. So I have to say, there was quite an outburst, but for me, by now, I find this quite amusing, I have to say, because I don't take this person seriously. But it is a fact that we have to fight for what we want to achieve. And to have just 3 words about me being a permanent rapporteur for gender mainstreaming, I'm advocating actually the balance of gender on 2 levels. First of all, on policy level, which means not to be gender blind in policy making. Because we have to be aware of the fact that female lives or women's lives differ from the lives of men. This is a fact. I mean, we have just different ways of going through our lifetime. And this also has to be reflected in the law as such. Otherwise, if we are not aware of this and if we are not aware of gender blindness, we don't take the female position into account. The other level is the decision-making bodies, including the Secretariat, of course, where we want to have gender-based, gender equality in the sense that we have women represented in order to avoid what was mentioned before, the invisibility of women. Because you can only be gender aware if you have both genders represented. So this is actually the basis of our report. And I have to say, and I want to say this really very clearly, that when I was drafting this report, and it was actually approved exactly 1 year ago, I had a big support from the Secretariat, from Mr. Rossetti, who is sitting here, from the late Mr. Herwig Kaiser, and from you, Mr. Papadimoulis. In fact, it is true that we need to line up, and we also need our support and strategic supporters for the action and the cause that we are fighting for. Without your support, it would have not been accepted so broadly, my report as it was. And also from your statement now, Mr. Papadimoulis, I see that we are going really into the right direction, and I think we will be successful in the coming years. Now, coming to one area which I was asked to refer a little bit to, about the social media, I had a very brief exchange of views a few minutes before we started. And actually, I also have to say that the feeling that you had, Madam Professor, I also think that social media are not a very easy place for female politicians. It is not an area where women can act as freely as we actually wanted to act. I mean, I remember during my election campaign for 2014 to become MEP, I had my first full-fledged shitstorm. And to go through this emotionally is not that easy. It was a strange topic, you know, we would never think it's emotional, but by now we all know that it's emotional. It was about TTIP. Huh? Oh, great. I was like, being an Austrian MEP and being in favor of free trade is like, like a big sin. And I just want to say that it is an area, I mean, the social media really have a tone and sometimes an atmosphere which is quite hostile towards women. In this context, I had an event with Madame Ambrasseur, whom you maybe know, who is a Luxembourgian politician and was the president of the Council of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And I invited her to Vienna, and we spoke about hate speech, especially also in the cyberspace, let's put it that way. And it is quite a challenge that we have to face. I was 2 weeks ago in Silicon Valley. I met with Google and Facebook and also other organizations where we also spoke about this. And actually it's very interesting and funny to see that somehow the perception is that, the internet is somehow as far as copyright and intellectual property is concerned, much more organized and under bigger pressure than whatever is related to human rights. Very concretely, when we talk about Europe, the European Convention of Human Rights. So we have to challenge this, because also from a female point of view, I have to say it's not that easy, because you are very much exposed. And you have actually all these sexual assaults as a woman, you feel much stronger than male colleagues, I would say. And just to wrap it all up, and to say also one thing about political participation, which I think is key as much as education and in a combination, because we will never have equality if we will not be represented at least up to 40% if we don't achieve 50%. Political parties are usually very male-dominated. I can say this clearly and with a very critical tone towards liberals. And in my own party, in Austria, NEOS, Neues Österreich Liberales Forum, we have a percentage of 18% of female members, 1/8. So I would say there's room for improvement. And we actually put in place promotee program, as we called it, actually with the how should I say, threat, if this doesn't work out, we will just include quotas, you know. So if it doesn't work out, it's a motivation, I would say. To promote proactively women and to convince them to take on actually this challenge of becoming a politician. And on a European level, as liberals on a European level, as ALDE, we have a so-called Women's Academy, where actually it's women training women, and it's also an area where women can somehow test if they want to do it, if they get a little bit of a feeling what it means to be a politician, if it is something that they want to handle and want to take on. But it's also clear that it is some sort of a place where they are protected and amongst them before they are somehow let out in the wilderness. So much from my side for the moment, and I hand over.